Hey class, we're going to continue on with the nervous system by talking about the two major divisions of our nervous system. As a general reminder, the two major divisions is our central nervous system, which include the brain and spinal cord. We covered the central nervous system's organs in the previous lessons. Today, we're going to focus on our peripheral nervous system, which is abbreviated PNS. This is going to include nerves that extend off of our brain and spinal cord and service the rest of our body. Also, as a general reminder, remember these two nervous systems work together. So even though we did talk about the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system separately, again, they do work together in order for our body to communicate. So now focusing on our peripheral nervous system, this includes nerves that extend from our brain and spinal cord, and they are called spinal nerves and cranial nerves. Spinal nerves carry impulses to and from our spinal cord. Now, our spinal cord is going to service the parts of our body such as our hands, legs, feet, stomach, etc. Cranial nerves are going to carry impulses to and from the brain. Cranial nerves tend to function as taste buds, sight, hearing, smell, etc. The major function of our peripheral nervous system is to act as communication lines from sensory organs to the brain. The brain then processes that information and sends it to the peripheral nervous system, which then takes it to any glands and muscles that need to fulfill an action, such as contracting or releasing a hormone. This picture right here I've included in your notes towards the end. I might have put it in the beginning of your section that kind of illustrates the overall structure of our central nervous system that we're going to talk about today. You've seen this very top structure where we see things go hand in hand. However, this bottom part is new. One thing to note is that the arrows tend to be color-coded. If you see a blue arrow, that is going to mean that it is a sensory arrow, or in other words, it's going to go to the CNS. If you see a red arrow, that means it is motor, and that means it's going to go away from our CNS. So our sense organs is going to pick up any changes. Changes in temperature, we see a bright light, we see pain. It's going to send it to our brain through sensory, or what we called in the first lesson, afferent neurons. It's going to send it through our spinal nerves to our spine, or through our cranial nerves to our brain. Up in the brain, it's going to process that information and decide on a response. The red means it's motor and it's going to go away. So it's going to go from our brain out through our spinal nerves, and then from there are two pathways that our motor division can be split into. The first pathway is called the somatic, which we call the voluntary. The next one is autonomic, which we call involuntary. And then from there, the autonomic is split into two divisions, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic division. So this is going to be the image I'm going to be talking about the majority of the lesson. So the PNS has two major subdivisions, as we saw on the last page. The first one is sensory, which is called afferent division. Just like sensory neurons, these are going to be nerve fibers that carry information to our central nervous system, in other words, to our brain or spinal cord. This information can come from different structures, such as skin, skeletal muscle, or even our visceral organs. Usually when I say visceral organs, I'm talking about organs in our abdominal pelvic cavity, such as the stomach, pancreas, liver, etc. The second major subdivision is called the motor, or we call efferent division. This, just like motor neurons, this is going to carry impulses away from our central nervous system to something that we call effector organs, or organs that are going to cause an effect. These usually include muscles, such as skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and even glands. Within our motor division, we can actually divide it into two major areas. The first one is the somatic nervous system, and the second one is the autonomic nervous system. Sometimes we abbreviate it ANS. Our somatic nervous system is our voluntary control over our body. So this is going to be stimulating things like skeletal muscles. We can tell ourselves to smile, we can tell ourselves to move our hands, we have control over kicking our feet. Whereas the autonomic nervous system is going to be things that happen on our body automatically. We sometimes call this nervous system the involuntary nervous system. We do not have control over this. For example, it will stimulate cardiac muscles. We do not have control over our heart. Our body automatically keeps our heart beating at a steady rate. It also stimulates smooth muscle. So this is going to be usually muscles that are located in digestive organs to move our things throughout our body. Smooth muscle is usually located within our blood vessels to keep things moving throughout our blood vessels. It also helps stimulate glands, such as our pancreatic organ to release pancreatic juices, or our pineal gland to release things to help us sleep, like melatonin. And one thing to note about the autonomic nervous system is that it plays a huge role in homeostasis. So if we go back up to these divisions, we said that peripheral is separated into sensory and motor. We have now talked about how motor is separated into somatic and autonomic. The autonomic nervous system, also abbreviated ANS, it can be further divided into what we call the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. One thing to note about these is they both are going to work on organs that have automatic functions, but they do not cause the same effect. In other words, they both serve the same organ but have opposite effects, and sometimes we call these antagonistic. They counterbalance each other's activities. The sympathetic nervous system is meant to mobilize the body during any kind of extreme condition, such as fear, exercising, or rage. The parasympathetic nervous system allows us to unwind, or in other words, kind of cool off, relax, and conserve energy. Let's look at these two divisions separately. Oftentimes, you might have heard something called the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response is actually part of your autonomic nervous system. Specifically, it's contributed to your sympathetic division. The response to usual stimulus whenever you are emotionally or physically stressed or threatened comes from this division. It also takes over to increase activities that would allow you to have this fight or flight response, such as increasing your heart rate, making sure you're doing rapid, deep breathing in order to get enough oxygen in your body. This allows your cold sweat, and it helps dilate your pupils. Usually we call this the E division because it helps with exercise, excitement, any emergency situations, or even if you are embarrassed, such as giving a presentation. The effects of the sympathetic nervous system activation continues for several minutes or until hormones are destroyed by the liver. While nerve impulses may be brief, the release of hormones from this division kicking into effect actually may linger, which is why they say you may need time to calm down if you're in any kind of emotional situation or response. This actually enables the body to cope rapidly with situations that threaten homeostasis. Do you need to protect yourself? Do you need to cool down quickly, etc.? The other half of that, and the opposite effect of the sympathetic, is your parasympathetic division. This usually is in charge of housekeeping activities. We call this the rest and digest system. This helps conserve energy, so usually when you're relaxing. This maintains daily functions, such as it wants to make sure your blood pressure is decreasing when you're relaxing. You tend to have a lower heart rate because you're not moving, you're sitting. You have a lower respiratory rate because you don't need as much oxygen in order to make ATP. Your digestion, though, is going to increase because you need to digest that food and spend your energy there because you don't have to spend your energy running or fighting. Your skin is generally warm because there's no need to divert that blood away from your skin to skeletal muscles. This is sometimes called the D division because it's in charge of things like digestion, defecation, which is pooping, or diuresis, which is eliminating any kind of urine or pee in your body. This is a table that I've taken out of your textbook that shows how the parasympathetic and the sympathetic division affects different parts of your body differently. For example, in your digestive system, we talked about how your parasympathetic increases the amount of glands or enzymes that your digestive system releases to digest food, essentially, whereas your sympathetic nervous system decreases these activities. You aren't going to undergo digestion. If we think about the parasympathetic in terms of lungs, these are going to constrict bronchioles, or it's going to constrict things within your lungs because you don't need as much oxygen. Whereas in your sympathetic nervous system, these branches in your lungs are going to dilate. They're going to open up to allow more airflow in. If we think about parasympathetic in terms of our heart, it's going to decrease our heart rate. Whereas in sympathetic, our fight or flight, we're going to increase our heart rate. Even when we look at glands such as salivary, which is our saliva, lacrimal, which is tears, and gastric, which is our stomach, the parasympathetic is going to stimulate this. It's going to create more saliva, tears, and gastric juices. Whereas the sympathetic nervous system is going to inhibit this because it needs to spend its ATP or its energy elsewhere. This is also, again, another slide that shows the effects. And that is the end of today's lesson. If you have any questions, please make sure you ask, and I hope you guys have a great day.